At first, ice skating was used as a way of transportation across cold landscapes. Animal bones were used to glide across the flat ice, enabling travelers to cover more ground. It wasn't until the medieval period that ice skating began to develop into a form of entertainment. During this time, the winters were colder, rivers and lakes froze deeper for longer, allowing skating to be used as a leisure activity. These skates, usually made of cow or horse metatarsal bones, were fastened to the wearer's shoes using leather straps. Because bones do not have an edge to push off of, forward motion was achieved by a long stick tipped with metal. The first written record of ice skating came in the 12th century, describing children in Canterbury, England, playing on the ice with animal bones attached to their boots. For the first time, in the 13th or 14th century, the blades attached to footwear were made of steel instead of bone. About the same time, blades took on proportions very close to their modern ones. The social status of ice skating varies per country. In countries with cold climates, ice skating was typical for all classes. In other places, only members of the upper classes were allowed to skate. Skating came to France during the reign of Louis XVI, and Emperor Rudolph II of the Holy Roman Empire loved it so much, a large ice carnival was built in his court in 1610 to popularize it. The British royal family were the ones who made ice skating popular in the mid-1600s. They made it the pastime to do and be seen doing. While exiled to Holland during the Civil War, the royals learned to skate, and rather well too. King James II became particularly fond of the sport, and held ice skating displays for the British aristocracy on his return to Britain. During the cold winters of the 1600s, the Thames frequently froze over, giving rise to the great frost fairs, where Londoners and royals alike could engage in ice skating. In colonial America, ice skating was commonplace, especially in New York, Delaware, and Pennsylvania, where settlers of Dutch and Swedish heritage kept up the traditions of their homelands. Upon visiting New York in 1678, English clergyman Charles Woodley noted, "And upon the ice it's admirable to see men and women as if they were flying upon their skates from place to place, with markets upon their heads and backs." Americans continued ice skating in the 18th century, not just as a means of transport, but also for leisure. Skating slowly began taking on its modern form in the 18th century. At this time, ice skating was a sport of circles and figure eights, not jumps and spins, and women did not normally participate. In 1742, the Edinburgh Skating Club became the first ice skating association, and in 1772, the very first instructional book, A Treatise on Skating, was published by Robert Jones in London. In the 1740s, British servicemen introduced ice skating to North America. It was also popular at the French court around 1776. Marie Antoinette was among the skaters. Napoleon Bonaparte skated at Auxerre in 1781. In the 18th century, during the brisk winter months, Parisians flocked to the glistening frozen fields of the glacier. The grassy terrain, flooded with water and frozen over, was an icy playground for upper-class citizens. Around the mid-1800s, advances in the skates allowed them to be more comfortable, safer, and more available to the masses. The all-steel skate was introduced in 1850, replacing the cumbersome wooden footplate. Around 1858, sex segregation at ponds disappeared. Societal norms were changing just enough so men and women could interact under certain prescribed circumstances. As skating was seen as a morally acceptable activity, it became one of the only activities single men and women could do together unchaperoned. It was difficult for unmarried individuals to be monitored on a crowded ice rink by an older family member who might not be able to keep up with them on ice. In England, the sport grew in popularity amongst the aristocracy of the early 18th century, in part because of Robert Jones' instructional book. In 1830, the second oldest skating club was created in London. By the middle of the 19th century, ice skating was a firm British favorite. Queen Victoria and Prince Albert themselves used ice skating trips to get to know each other more. Ice skating was further popularized by Empress Eugenie of France. The 1885 edition of Demarest Monthly Magazine reported, "Skating became quite the rage in Paris in 1860 under the lead of the Emperor and Empress, both of whom excelled in the exercise." In the 1860s, ice skating became enormously popular in New York City, with a rink opening in Central Park during the winter of 1858 to 1859, reigniting interest in the sport. New Yorkers had practically forgotten about it, as the downtown ponds that had once been used for skating, like the Collect Pond, had long been built over. Fashionable New Yorkers trekked north from Washington Square to go ice skating. They lured the elite with costume balls, fireworks, music, spacious restaurants, and selective membership. People who didn't live within walking distance took carriages and horse-drawn railway cars. Skating became the highlight of the winter social season. Central Park, as intended, reintroduced residents to fresh air activities. Within a few years, 3 more park ponds were opened for skating. Park commissioners opened the ponds when 4 to 5 inches of ice had built up. When they felt it was safe enough to hold thousands of skaters at a time, they raised a red ball by the bell tower, just south of the reservoir. "The ball is up" was code for a skating day, creating great excitement. The city railroad cars also signified skating days by flying white flags with red balls on the end of each vehicle. Some cars were even said to fly this flag falsely in order to attract customers. The skating pond was surrounded by buildings for renting skates or warming up by a fire. On the southern shore, the rude but comfortable casino, run by Charles A. Stetson, owner of the luxury hotel, the Astor House, served beer, cream soda, and hot chocolate. The park restaurants catered to a wide range of New Yorkers. Visitors to the skating pond were of all ages, sexes, and conditions of life. Scots held curling matches on the lower pond. Workers from Ireland and Germany thronged the ice on Sundays. The ladies were the main attraction of the skating ponds. At first, they had their own enclosure in Central Park, but it didn't last long. It proved to be so unpopular that it was integrated into the rest of the rink by 1870. For many women, the whole point was to show off to the men and skate together. At the park, wrote the Times, it was a common sight to see a gentleman with 2 pairs of skates on one arm and a bundle of crinoline on the other. Skating also conveniently drew couples close together on moonlit nights. The habit of depending upon gentlemen for support is a most pernicious one, a contemporary observed. The men were often treated to the flash of an ankle or even the chance to tie a woman's skates and get the faintest peep of the hem of the lady's undergarment. Fit and attractive, the women were prime wife material. Many a young fellow has lost his heart and skated himself into matrimony on the Central Park pond, wrote an 1866 guidebook. Reporters stated the sight of pretty girls, prettier legs, the prettiest feet on the ponds. But the women were more than just eye candy. They were talented skaters who thrilled in the sport. It was a liberating escape from the stifling ballroom, despite the cold. Contemporary observers welcomed it as an invigorating new amusement that gave women strength and energy. Women made ice skating fashionable, but Central Park was becoming overcrowded. Soon enough, the upper class got its own private pond. In 1862, Major Oscar Oatman, who ran Park Slope's high-end Washington Skating Club, opened the Fifth Avenue Pond, the first private pond in Manhattan. It was, the Herald said, the resort of the higher classes who desire to be select in their skating as in everything else. The Fifth Avenue Pond was located in a hollow that sheltered it from the wind. Oatman fenced the area and erected buildings for a cloakroom and a saloon with warming stoves. He was a constant friendly presence at the pond, attending to every detail. The ice was kept clean as a parlor, with workers quickly sweeping up snow and cigar stumps. Women and children could take lessons, while those unable to skate could be pushed in chairs with gliders. At night, limelights and large reflectors illuminated the pond. Every afternoon, a brass band played, a variety of national and operatic selections. This could be a challenge, though, in the cold. Even when the city experienced record below-zero temperatures in January 1866, the musicians blew on through chattering teeth. Oatman only admitted members of character and respectability, who could produce quality references and pay $10 for a season pass, which was more than most New Yorkers made in a week. The pond opened as early as 7 a.m., since fashionables were in the habit of skating before breakfast, and shut at midnight. It was closed on Sundays, which was then considered in good taste. It also happened to be the only day most people had off. The patrons of the Fifth Avenue Pond looked sharp on the ice. They wore beribboned caps, Highland plaids, fur muffs, and custom skates costing up to $50, some $700 today. Bright colors prevailed, with dark hues deemed too gloomy for the merry scene. Dresses were just above the ankle, which was short for the time. Men wore chinchilla peacoats and Scottish wool trousers. Each season, Harper's Bazaar made detailed recommendations for fashionable skating dress. Fur-trimmed Russian suits, plumed sealskin togered hats, jaunty short jackets, or calfskin skates with chamois lining. It advised against white undergarments while skating, preferring blue merino stockings. As for the ladies' hair, elaborate coiffures are in bad taste in the half-undress of the skating costume. It said in 1869, "Better, a braided chignon with crimped tress is not too dressy." The highlights of the season were the skating carnivals, or costume balls on the ice, a spectacle rarely if ever before seen out of Russia. The events drew carriage after carriage of patrons, and featured costume skaters, ice dancing, and fireworks. At one ball in January 1865, the Tribune reported some skaters wore grotesque masks, or dressed as Seneca Indians. People gathered outside the pond to look down at the spectacle. There you beheld a beautiful girl with a jockey hat and rooster feather, exciting in wonderful style a charming pas de deux with a fur-clad gentleman. Oatman also hosted ladies' skating matches, capitalizing on the pond's primary draw. The novel contest drew crowds to the surrounding banks to watch women compete for a solid gold medal. At a match in February 1868, the Evening Post reported, "Spectators comprised ladies and gentlemen belonging to the highest circles of society in this city. As a winner was chosen, each of her competitors received a gold medal also." The judges of the contests were members of the New York Skating Club. Founded in 1863, the club was headquartered at the Fifth Avenue Pond from 1865 until 1868. They had their own clubhouse on the property and constantly put on a show at the pond. Many of the members, the Herald said, are perfect masters of the art of skating, and their graceful motions on the ice never failed to excite the admiration of all visitors to this uptown resort. The Fifth Avenue Pond stayed open until at least 1868. With the closure, the club moved across Fifth Avenue. Mitchell's Pond hosted the New York Skating Club next. Located at the current site of the Plaza Hotel, it had similar amenities to Oatman's, with skating contests, live music, and polka dancing on ice. After Mitchell's closed, the club briefly moved to McMillan's Pond at 46th Street and 5th Avenue, run by one of its own members. Surrounded by elegant mansions, it replaced the Fifth Avenue Pond as a gathering spot for the elite. On a Christmas-time visit in 1870, a sports magazine observed that so many people representing many of the leading families in the city were never seen on a skating pond before. This cozy little pond, the ice of which is in excellent skating order, is adapted to the convenience of the ostentatious specimens of humanity in which New York abounds. But this party too was short-lived. Soon artificial rinks replaced natural ponds. New Yorkers could now skate protected from the elements at the likes of the Empire City Skating Rink at 63rd Street and 3rd Avenue, which opened in 1868. The world's first mechanically frozen ice rink was the Glaciarium in London in 1876. It had paintings of mountain scenery adorning the walls and live music from an orchestra playing in the background. In the late 18th century England, according to historian Mary Louise Adams, there were on average 18 skating days a year. Those who wished to perfect their skating movements needed the money to travel to places like the Swiss Alps. The Glaciarium was designed to appeal to those aristocrats who could save a trip to the Alps. The rink was membership only and attracted a wealthy clientele. A viewing section was set up for those who could not afford a ticket to watch. This new technology turned an exclusively winter activity into an all-year-round attraction. After an initial success, leading to the opening of 2 more rinks, the expense proved too much, and all 3 rinks closed in mid-1878. Before this, rinks inspired by the 1876 Glaciarium popped up everywhere from Australia to Paris, where wealthy patrons met opening night with such excitement that they quickly turned into chaos. The Paris mania started with one of these rinks. When France's first indoor ice skating rink opened in May 1876, wealthy Parisians flooded the building, eager to see how a large swath of ice could remain frozen so close to summer. Within minutes, the place was crammed to suffocation, and yet thousands of ladies and gentlemen on foot and in carriages continued to arrive. This ice rink marked the first time that real ice had been used in an indoor skating venue in Europe, making ice skating available all year round. The first artificially frozen rink in the United States was installed in the old Madison Square Garden in New York in 1879. Throughout the century, more and more public rinks with artificially produced ice appeared. By the end of the 1800s, American newspapers were running front-page photos of New Yorkers flocking to artificially frozen ice rinks. This new ability allowed for ice skating to spread to regions with warm climates. This pastime continued to grow in popularity into the 20th century, and it remains a favorite wintertime activity today.